bring Sasha on. Hello, Sasha. Good morning. How are you?
Morning. How are you doing?
Oh, we're fantastic. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Did you change your background? Is that the same old place or you redecorated?
It's a new camera. You're very observant, Sasha.
Hmm, there you go.
Same background, but different camera. So the other one had more of a what they call a bouquet effect, where it was kind of blurred out. So
There
this
you
one
go.
is a little bit crisper, and people seem to like this view a little bit more.
Maybe I just noticing the printer for the first time.
Yes, it's always been there.
There you
Um,
go.
So, Sasha, let's ask before we get into talking about today's discussion. Let's address Ali's question straight out of the barn. So what is this policy about? I'm not quite sure that I'm following her because I don't know about it
Yeah.
myself. But is there something about changing your name? Why would you need to change your name on an account? Tell us what this is all about.
Not sure about her particular situation, but all accounts require a service deposit. So it might be that she was changing a name on an account, and so it's viewed as a new account. So if there wasn't a service deposit before, the new account would attract a service deposit. So that's sort of the service deposit policy, something that came in several years ago, so it might be that's what she's referring to. That there with an account name change, it's a fresh account, and so it is looked at as like a new application.
Mm. And I hear sometimes too, I think people don't understand things. And maybe this is where, we have like a sort of like a Q&A or an FAQ segment on here for the benefit of people. Like, what do you need when you open an account? What deposits are required? How it works? And because, I even hear people say, oh, somebody has died. Like, say the account was in my grandma's name, right? And she died 5 years ago. And I never got around to changing it. And then CUC says, hey, by the way, you need to change this into your name because if anything happens, you can't go for a dead person. You can't go after a dead person, right? For bad debt.
Yeah.
So, there's logical reasons why companies have certain policies in place. But I find that a lot of people just don't know what the policies are. Maybe they don't read, like I said, they're definitely not reading the contracts or the fine print. So maybe we have a segment one day, Sasha, where we just do like a basic FAQ.
Yeah, that'd be great. I think Nichelle and Jeever won a few weeks ago.
Yes.
They'll be fantastic for that sort of thing because it is there have been a few changes, and the thing is, many people don't really interact with CUC frequently, particularly if they haven't moved. So maybe the last time that they interacted with us is maybe 7-8 years ago, other than paying bills and power outages and stuff like that. So they wouldn't be aware of any changes we've made in terms of policies or procedures for doing work with us. A lot of the you were talking about CNB and their online banking. CUC's also moved to a lot of online service. In fact, you can do everything that you would want to do with us via phone or email or a website. And many people don't know that because they haven't had to do anything with us for the last 8 years or actually even 4 years. It's all started while we were all shut down in COVID and we were required to do it that way. So yeah, I mean, it would be great to talk about that on a show and get the experts on that.
Yeah. All right. So I see
exactly how it's done.
Yeah, Not So Hot has a question about the deposit as well and change of name. So let's sort of park some of those questions, Ali and Not So Hot, because Sasha is really here to talk about the future of energy. So he's here to speak on something very, very specific. But we will reach out to, like you said, maybe Jiva and Nichelle are more appropriate to answer those types of questions. We'll have them come in and do a whole FAQ segment on all the things that you need to know. I think that's a great idea. All right. So, Sasha, what is the future of energy?
Hopefully very bright. It's
no pun intended.
No pun from the light company, right? Exactly. So, we're at a really exciting time. There's a lot of technology changes that are happening in the energy space. A lot of advancements that are going to really allow Cayman to move away from a diesel-powered system to a majority renewable energy, whether that's solar or wind or something else. And it's a really exciting time. The power system that was put together and it is still the one that we're primarily using today is not is fairly well understood technology, but it's not simple. And there's a lot of things that make it work and make it reliable, like how it is today. And so changing from that with our reliability and taking on new technologies, and keeping that service reliability is a really interesting task, and certainly one that we're working on pretty much every day. That little picture you got there showing this, I believe that's the Bodentown solar plant, which we went out and we started the procurement for that back in 2011, and then I think it finally went in service in 2017. Is a good example of what we see happening here, in a very big way. That plant's what would be typically called sort of a utility scale. It's primarily there just to generate power and sell it. It's not serving any individual customer type of thing. And it is right now the lowest cost form of energy on the grid in Grand Cayman.
Wow. Okay. So when we talk about solar, I mean, a lot of people I think are still coming to a degree of understanding about what that means and the different ways in which it can be utilized by people here. Some people kind of get the concept at the sort of micro level of you can have solar panels, on your house top on your roof, and that can supply and offset, what you're using in terms of energy, as long as you've got panels that can, take in a certain amount of what the sun has to offer. But there's a potential and there's an idea, and we've seen a little bit of applications of it. Like take, for example, at Cayman Bay, they've got the big solar panels on the top of like their parking garages and so on, parking lots, right? So there is a concept of it being used in a much larger way. Yeah. Is that what we mean when we say utility scale solar?
Yeah. So it's hard. There've been some interesting discussions about what is utility scale. And there really is no universal definition of that. Every single jurisdiction kind of takes its own sort of view on what it is. And in general, the way that we look at it is utility scale is anything that's large enough and is designed to really serve as it's just selling power to the grid, right? It's a commercial entity. It's designed to sell power and really be in business of selling power. And when somebody is doing that, anybody, whether it's CUC or another power company or even a private individual, they then need that system to perform like a utility style system. It needs to be cost competitive. It needs to be reliable, et cetera, et cetera. And that should really not be any difficulty with that kind of thing, because the technology is viable to do that type of thing. And the costs are low enough that anything of the size of what you're showing on the screen now, which is I said that was built in 2015 or 16 and put online in 2017. The costs of doing that now are, I would say, probably less than half of what was paid for this. And so if you think about that, and this is already the lowest cost power on the grid, well, the next one should be far lower, right? And so that's what we're really looking for with the utility scale, is the more and more that we can get of that, the lower and lower cost we can see on the grid. To compete between solar and diesel is super easy. It's like shooting fish in a barrel in terms of in terms of lowering costs, and there seems to be a lot of barriers to utility scale, and actually it seems like none of them are with respect to people not wanting to do solar, but more things like who's going to do it. And you see there's a lot of playing going on in the market where if we would just get on with it and even do the competitive tender that we've been talking about for a while, we would be so much better off. CUC's put together a sample project that we designed in 2019, and that project alone would be saving Cayman today with fuel rates over $10 million a year. Just one project,
Wow.
would save $10 million a year in fuel costs. And that's not just the total cost of the fuel, that's the net. So removing fuel cost, replacing it with solar cost, the net difference would be $10 million. That's one project. And so, the more and more time that we spend on thinking about how we're going to do this and when we're going to do this and how we're going to do it perfectly, it's leaving money on the table for the country that could be spent elsewhere.
And what about the criticism that people say, hold on a second, CUC has been, in the business of providing, obviously, utility service for a really, really long time. Why should they be potentially at the forefront of doing it with solar? How do you respond to that criticism that maybe CUC shouldn't be the ones to be involved?
I don't really understand it because I do understand it, but when you look at all of the facts of CUC as a company, yes, the service is expensive, but it's primarily expensive because we're using a fuel that is the majority of the cost. When you look at the actual service level, yes, that there are service errors and so on that happen that we can do better on. But by and large, the reliability of service from CUC, it's the best in the Caribbean, which is pretty indisputable. And even with our costs, we are middle of the pack compared to the rest of the Caribbean, with really only large countries that either have a good amount of renewable energy because of wind resources or hydro resources, or in the case of Trinidad, where they get their fuel for free. Those are the type of countries that are beating us on cost. When you compare ourselves to our neighbors, who are substantially larger than us next door in Jamaica, our costs are actually lower in many cases than Jamaican rates. Now, the average Jamaican household pays less per month, but that's because they're using less electricity and less air conditioning load than the average Caymanian house is. So, costs are, in terms of the dollars per kilowatt hour, CUC is extremely competitive. So that's why I said I don't understand why people would not want CUC to do solar. In general, the laws are set up now that any new generation should be competitively tendered, right? And we support that. We signed on for it back in 2008, and we actually entered the first competition for a generation in 2013-14, and that was a diesel tender, yes, and we did win it. But I don't see why we should not be allowed to provide an option for the country on a solar scale, and anybody who says they want to have competition, but they don't want a particular player to play in the competition is perhaps not really looking for the best result. Maybe, that's like saying, oh, okay, once you win the heavyweight title, you're no longer allowed to box because you're the best person and the next person can't win. That doesn't make sense to me, right? If CUC ends up being the best bid, that's what's best for the country. If we're not, then the other bidder that has a better bid is what's best for the country, and CUC will happily sign on with them, right? So, like I said, I don't understand the move that's going on. Well, it doesn't make sense to consider why would CUC not play in this space if CUC has a compelling offer to provide.
Yep. All right, caller. Good morning and welcome to the program.
Morning.
Morning.
I have two questions. When Sacha was talking about the utility scale, he used the word individual in there, and I'm not sure whether that includes an individual who's producing more than they need for themselves in their own home, or are you talking about an individual who has a trading as business? Like what do you mean individual?
Yeah, so I think this is Denny. Hi, Denny.
Hey, Denny.
So what I'm referring to there is, so the picture that Sandy has up on the screen is the Bontown solar plant. And it's within the realm of possibility that a local company or a local person would have the means of investing in something of that size, right? So that's kind of what I'm referring to, and that anybody that is, and this is really a regulatory type discussion, and perhaps I shouldn't speak for the regulator, but in my view, and I think in the company's view, anybody that is generating electricity that is not really primarily for self-consumption really should be competing for the right to do so. In the instance which I think you're referring to, where somebody has a solar system on their home or their business, which is sized to primarily serve themselves, but at times of the day, because of the way solar is, there's an excess and it should go onto the grid. Those type of arrangements fit very well into a consumer program, because they are in general a consumer of services from the grid, and they're also producing and sharing in the grid, but they are largely still what one would consider a consumer, rather than an entity that's set up to provide power to the grid as their primary goal.
Okay. The reason I asked about the individual, because I think of that in a very strict sense. If you're going to be doing an industrial, commercial, if you're going to be doing a utility scale project, I doubt that a person would be doing that in their own name, right? And so they probably wouldn't be technically an individual anymore, right?
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify that that language, because when you're talking about contractual things, using a term that defines one thing for something else gets confusing fast.
Yeah, no, and thanks for asking the question, because if you thought it, I'm sure others thought it. So, the intent was just recognizing that on the smaller side of the utility scale market, the investment level is certainly within the capability of certain individuals on the island, right? So, I would expect that a plant like the one that we're looking at here is somewhere in the $5 to $10 million investment range, which is a lot of money, but for some people on the island, it's well within their reach in terms of an investment portfolio type activity. So that was the only reason why I said that it could very well be in these smaller scales, that it's either an individual or a small local company that is able to do it, if they're able to raise the capital.
One more question. What is the win rating of that facility in Bontown?
I'm not sure offhand, but I am certain that it complied with the BCU requirements at the time it was constructed. And in general, that's what we would expect moving forward. I believe BCU is now asking for survivability up to 182 mile an hour gusts, which is basically a Cat 5 rating. It's aligned very closely with the Miami-Dade ratings as well. And to design a solar plant to comply with that kind of wind rating requirement is not a difficult thing to do.
Okay.
Whether it's on a rooftop or on the ground. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just that I worry that you talk about reliability, and it's not if we're going to get a hurricane, right? And the worst scenario we could find ourselves in is having a hurricane come through and smash up several islands, and we're all on board with solar, and then we're all trying to get panels at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, and we think about that too, and there's a bit of a saving grace in at least in the medium term on how that would be managed. So there's another instance that is less catastrophic, but just as equally challenging, and that is and I think for those who have been around long enough know that we will almost certainly have week-long rainy, cloudy periods. And solar production during those weeks might be down to, at best, 10%.
Right.
And so if we've got all of our eggs in that basket, then what do we, because it's raining, because we have a long rainy tropical storm type of situation, we can't have power? No, that doesn't work. So the reality of the situation is the island will have backup generation, much like a local business would invest in, or some people do for their homes. And that backup generation would be CUC's existing power plant. And we're doing a lot of things to see how we can extend the life of that plant so that we don't have to invest in new engines to provide that backup. Right now our most efficient engines will run 8,000 hours a year. And maybe when we get all the solar that we're asking for, maybe they'll only run for 1,000 or 1,500 hours a year. But for that long week period, or if for some reason we have significant damage from a hurricane, the engines will be there until we can fix that damage.
Okay, Danny?
Well, all right.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Good questions, Danny. Thanks.
Yeah, some good things to think about for sure. So when we're talking about this utility scale solar versus rooftop solar, what are the differences? Like, people are going, okay.
Well, in very simple terms, thanks for the picture there. I think that's in Yacht Club. So in very simple terms, rooftop or distributed solar is typically placed on roofs of businesses and homes. It's usually much smaller scale, but it's the exact same technology. And there's really not much in between them in terms of how they behave. I think the one in terms of how they behave, that there is one sort of difference. On a utility scale plant, those plants are typically monitored and controlled by direct communications from the grid operator. And so if we need it to operate in a specific way, for example, instead of charging the battery, maybe we want to discharge the battery that's associated with it, we can send controls to that plant to make sure that it's playing with the grid in a way that's providing reliable service. On a small scale, like the one that you're showing there, let's say that's maybe 10 or 20 kW that's in the picture, having communications down to that very small amount is not very efficient. Although I suspect moving forward, we are going to have to develop ways of doing that, because as the rooftop industry grows, we're going to want a way to be able to send signals and say, hey, okay, all right, we need your battery to behave in a different way because the grid is having this sort of condition, and we need the storage to behave in a different way than the normal configuration. So that's probably the only technical difference between the two. On a financial level, there is a significant difference, and it's really not rocket science. But if you're buying 20 panels like what you're showing on that household, that might be about 30. That's a pallet of panels. If you're doing a utility scale project, it might be 140-foot containers. And so you can imagine that the purchasing process is far more efficient, and you get the economies of scale. And as a result, you can get the costs much lower on utility scale than you can on rooftop. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't do rooftop. It just means that we have to recognize that there are different benefits. One of the things that rooftop can do that utility scale can't is, particularly if the customer also invests in storage, when there is a power outage, they can have continuity of service from their batteries. And also, as CUC develops various grid programs where consumers can do more than just export their excess energy, they may be able to provide grid support with their batteries and receive an additional credit for doing so. Those software programs don't exist, but the primary benefit, there's two benefits of distributed generation right now. The main one is for the consumers that own it. They can invest in rooftop solar and receive a savings on their electricity bill. That's the main reason why people are doing it now, because they're not having to burn expensive diesel fuel to get their engine. To get their energy. they're using energy from their solar system, and so
Right.
they get a credit on their bill for that. The other benefit is, like I told you, if they have batteries, they can get continuity of service from their system. And also, if they have batteries and they're on a demand rate, like our large commercial customers are, they can use the battery to manage their demand charges. But I have to ask, what happens when the national energy policy goals are met? And I fully believe that they will be met. And the grid is 70% solar. And that solar was done in a way that it was super cheap because we've done things in an efficient way. Are those grid savings a benefit to the end customer that has done the distributed generation still there? And I think the answer is going to be no, but that's probably 7, 8, 9, 10 years down the road. So for a customer investing in it now, it's probably a good deal.
Right.
In the long run, I suspect that as the national energy policy goals are achieved, and there's a large amount of solar on the grid, whether it's from utility scale or distributed, and the cost of energy comes down, then in that case, well, there's not going to be a whole lot of savings to be had by putting the solar at your home. And the real benefit will remain to be that, in the event of an outage, you can use your solar and battery to self-serve your service. So, one of the parallels, and I hate to do a parallel between diesel and solar, but people understand it, right? So right now, people can buy diesel power from CUC at our prices, or they can put in a diesel generator at their business or home and self-supply. And that diesel generator will reliably supply them, at least for 3 months until they need to do maintenance on it, etc. But everybody knows that is a higher cost way of doing it. So people don't do that because it's higher cost, because it's smaller, the economies of scale aren't there. But they still buy diesel generators because they want continuity of supply, right? So I think that in the long run, 10 years from now, when the grid is, say, somewhere between 50 and 100% renewable energy, and the costs are much lower than they are today, the attraction of putting solar and battery on your home will reduce to the level of what the attraction is now of buying a diesel generator to back up your home or business. But right now, it's very attractive to put solar and battery on your home, and I'm going to do it on mine when I build it because there's a big cost savings. But
let's talk about the cost savings.
It's going to go away in the long run.
Yeah, we've got Not So Hot saying that solar panels are way too expensive. I don't think it's worth it. Not So Hot goes on to say that the savings just go to the bank to pay off the loan, and then my insurance goes up to cover the panels. So it's not worth it. The price of the panels need to come down about 40% for it to be worth it for them. Then it's hit or miss during the rainy season. So Not So Hot coming up with every foreseeable argument against rooftop solar.
I'm not sure I agree with Not So Hot. I think there are situations where rooftop solar can provide a meaningful cost savings to customers. And I think you're a good example of that. I believe you're one of our core customers. And we have hundreds of them that have made that decision. And some people actually just say, look, hey, I want to be more environmentally friendly, right? There are some, usually it's on the corporation side. They're trying to get a LEED certification for their building or whatever. And they're trying to be more environmentally sustainable. And so they do it for that. They're not necessarily, they gladly take the cost savings, but they stack that as a benefit to themselves. But I do think that, especially today with the programs that CUC has and will have, and the cost of energy as it is today, that it is a good deal for customers who can afford it to get solar on their homes.
Yeah. No, I mean, I mean, Not So Hot. I'm not sure what kind of numbers you've been crunching and working with, but I can tell you again from personal experience, because we have solar panels and we did it a number of years ago, that even your like say you roll it into like your mortgage or whatever, right, to be able to pay for it. The amount that you're paying versus what you realize for us in savings right away, like literally we were in a credit for the longest time, and then our usage went up, which, you know, we're still saving $400 or $500 a month, but we weren't paying $400 or $500 extra on a mortgage, you know, because I mean, say it's $60,000. I mean, I don't know, to put your panels on, depends on how many panels you're getting, the size of the roof space and whatever. And you roll that into a 20-year mortgage, that isn't going to increase your monthly mortgage by $400 or $500 plus insurance and whatever. So I'm not really sure what kind of numbers you're working with there.
Yeah.
Not so hot, but I think, you know.
And I think it's about expectation too. You know, we hear comments, and I see there's one in the thing talking about sun is free. Very true, but solar panels are not. So to convert the energy from the sun to electricity and use it,
that's a
there is a cost. So whether that cost is you pay a CUC bill, or you pay a bank a monthly payment for the loan that you took to get that, there is a cost, and it's, you know, the energy for free that doesn't really exist, because there's always a cost no matter where you get it from. What consumers need to do is be educated on what their choices are and choose what's best for them. Some people want to be able to control their own destiny, and they actually don't care what it costs. They just they want to control their own destiny, and you know what? Great for them. And some people, they don't want the hassle. They don't want to have to deal with, you know, maintaining their energy system. They just want the lights on. They want it cheap and they want it reliable. And there are other people that play in between those two extremes, right? And that's fine. And we're here to serve all of them.
Yeah. Ms. Morna, who's making that comment saying the sun is free, she says the battery costs more than the solar panels.
It's very true.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, we decided at the time not to get a battery, only because we're kind of focusing on, well, let's get the panels in. And then a battery is something you can add on a lot easier, sort of at a later date if you wish. And in fact, what we've done instead is we've just gotten a backup generator that's diesel, that's propane, I should say.
Yeah, because it's cheaper than the batteries, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, none of these options are like really super cheap, because if you get proper,
it's providing energy is not cheap business.
Propane, if you get a proper propane system with a backup generator and you have the professionals do it and you're not hoodwinking it yourself, you're going to pay for that. So a couple of people asking the question, sorry, about being able to go off the grid completely. What does that mean?
It means you cut the cord. And it's been an option for locals since before CUC existed, and still is one today. And it's not a terribly attractive option, because what happened, I think consumers recognize a couple of things. Number one, it's expensive. Number two, what happens when their system needs to be taken offline for maintenance, because everything needs maintenance. That means you then have to build excess capacity to manage your maintenance and so on. And the cost just stack and stack and stack. And that is really why the grid exists, not just in Grand Cayman, but all over the planet, right? Grids exist to prevent customers from having to go to those costs to get their energy needs, right? You spread the backup across all of the entire customer base, and instead of having to have 2 times the capacity you need for your own service, when you spread that out over the grid, we can share backup between different customers. So right now, CUC's license requires it to have between 35 and 55% reserve capacity for that purpose. On an individual basis, you would probably need between 100 and 150% reserve capacity to keep the same reliability level as what CUC does. And that's one of the huge values that a grid brings, not just the Cayman grid, any grid brings to the electric service market.
So, Aliano, your question or comment then says, why is there no real off-the-grid options, a complete divorcing system? There are. But you, the person who wants to go off the grid, has to be responsible for sourcing whoever's going to make that happen for you.
So you can buy your own diesel generator. You don't even need to do it through solar. You can do it with your own generator. You can do it with solar and a battery. You could theoretically do it with a wind turbine if you can get the permitting for it. I mean, there's a lot of ways to do it, but there are no cheap ways.
You know, during Hurricane Ivan, I used to be one of those people that complained about CUC a lot pre-Ivan, and then Ivan hit.
So you have to pay for fuel for your generator?
I had to get it. I had to get a generator like a lot of other people. 8 weeks plus without power, and every day having to, you know, and back then,
$50 of fuel a day. Yeah.
Oh my God! Listen, I really sat down and worked. I worked it out. Like if I had to try to do this myself, this is ridiculous. Yeah, and from that day forward, I've always tried to be more balanced about what it is that CUC offers, what we're paying for it, you know, the benefits, the reliability. Yes, there's always room for improvement. I'm sure of that. But I see it so differently. And not to mention things like me not having to get my hands dirty, not having to worry about the switch. And I flip the switch in the morning. It's going to work. I'm going to get my hot water to shower. You know, I'm not having to go outside and look at that generator. You know, how do I get?
But make no mistake, Sandy. I think you understand the situation because you've tried and learned from your own efforts in certain parts of the energy space that you've done for yourself. But you know, CUC does have a lot of questions to answer. And that's part of why we're here. Because that there are a lot of questions that customers have, some of which because they've been given incorrect information, and that's on us to help correct it and set the facts straight. And some of it is because we've made mistakes and we need to correct things as well. But more often than not, I think the more that we can help customers understand some of the nuances and challenges of providing energy as a service, the more and more we can make decisions together as a country to move forward and make things better, right? Because it's not, you know, this whole renewable energy space, you know, there's a lot of criticism and from us as well. Why hasn't it happened faster, right? And I'll jump right on that bandwagon. Why hasn't it happened faster? But the reality is we have regulations in place and laws in place that require this process to be managed by licensees, regulators, and the government in a way to make sure that we don't go down the wrong path, right? Make sure that we do protect reliability, make sure that we do protect the environment, make sure that we do protect costs for customers. And so thus far, there's been a number of proposals that get pushed and say, well, if we could do it this way, we could get it done faster. But when you look at the details of those proposals, it's like, okay, well, yeah, but it's going to increase costs by whatever percent. So maybe that's not a great idea because all of the customers are telling us every single day, it costs too much already. So why are we going to go up in price to solve a problem? We're actually going to take on another problem. So, you know, there's a lot of time and effort spent. I think the government and the regulator, for all of the flack that they get, are very focused on making sure that this is done in a way that reduces costs and it makes benefits for their environment. And I think once we hold on to cost and reliability and we keep the energy system in Grand Cayman as reliable and safe as it is today, and we push forward on the transition, holding on to cost reduction, holding on to reliability, we're going to see that our country is going to be stronger, even stronger than it is now compared to our competitors in the region.
Yeah. And I think it's good, Sacha, you know, CUC is committed to coming on the program at least a couple times a month. And I think that this constant conversation with the consumers helps to educate them about what it is that you guys are doing. They have an opportunity to ask questions, just like Aliano and I forgot who else was saying, you know, why can't we come off the grid? You're saying you can, you know, and there are things that people get wrong all the time. And it's because it's been said so many times, the misinformation has been repeated so many times that people actually believe it. The other one is, you know, fuel factor. Well, CUC is charging too much for fuel factor. That's a pass-through cost. You guys don't add anything to it.
It is too much. Sandra, the cost of fuel is ridiculous. It's
but you're bonkers. Not marking that up. No, I completely agree. But you're not marking that up.
On the other side of the fence and yell back at the company, it costs too much. It really does cost too much.
Yeah.
Right. But we have to burn it to provide energy until we get these solar panels.
Yeah.
Right. So, and we can't just say, oh, well, let's increase the cost of energy so that we can sell solar faster. No, that's not acceptable either. Right. Let's go and get as much solar as we can, as cheap as we can get it, and make sure it doesn't blow away in the wind.
All right. So what else has CUC been doing to progress renewable energy on Grand Cayman?
Well, geez.
That's
so I got 5 minutes to tell you what I've been doing for the last 8 years. Well, not just me. A lot of people in the company, had a meeting yesterday, and I recognized, wow, the team that's working on this now fills a full conference room, and that's great. So I guess where we started off was really, it was even before we started the planning for it, we opened up the consumer programs. I want to say that was 2012-ish, when we had the first core program come on, core customer come on. And since then till now, which is, I guess, 11 years, we've sort of modified that program from time to time. We get accused for having start and stop and so on. And that's true, that it has opened and closed. And I would say that it's always been for good reason, whether that is managing cost escalation on the grid, or there have been times when we've had to pull the brakes because we recognize that the solar installers were installing systems in the wrong way, and they weren't following the guidelines that were very clearly put out, and they had to go back and fix it. So there have been issues that have happened in every other market that have advanced through this, and we've tried as best as possible to learn from those challenges in other markets, and still do. But nonetheless, we have 23 megawatts contracted on the grid, well, either contracted or on the grid, through consumer programs and the 5 megawatt program, 5 megawatt Bontown solar that you had on the screen earlier. And all of that is owned by other parties. CUC doesn't own any of it, but they've all been brought onto the grid through CUC programs, and facilitated through programs that we put forward to the regulator, work together with the regulator on making sure that the impacts of those programs were acceptable to the general customer, and it's been a good thing. We're now in a position where I think both the distributed market and the utility market can grow without any financial impact to the market, provided that there aren't pushes for increasing the cost of energy to justify them. But I don't think that's necessary. Like I said earlier, when you compete solar against diesel, it's super easy, right? So to think that we need to pay a premium over diesel is a long gone type of situation that only existed when we were trying to create the solar market. That's done now. Now the solar market needs to be advanced based on value, and based on competing against other options on the grid, which should be easy to do. Some other things that we've done, we did a wind study back in, you got it on the screen, did a wind study back in 2003, and we actually tried to procure for a wind power plant in 2008, but that fell on its feet when the Doppler weather radar came about, because wind turbines create disturbances in Doppler weather radar systems, and it's just, they can't coexist. And so the weather radar trumped wind, and so we moved on and focused on solar. I think we can do things in the future to make wind more viable, but right now it's not the low-hanging fruit that solar is. So we're focusing on solar, and we will come back to wind eventually. Or maybe somebody else will provide a compelling solution, which we would happily take part in.
And can I just pause you for a quick second there, Sacha?
Yeah.
I think that it's important for people to also recognize, and I see a very interesting comment here from Johan, but to understand, when you're transitioning or you're looking at renewable energy, you can't just wake up tomorrow and be like, oh, let's throw up a wind turbine right here in East End and we're good to go. And in a month, everybody's going to be able to benefit from that. I mean, from 2003, a feasibility study, 2008, there's a call for wind power partners. By 2010, basically it had to be abandoned because of the Doppler radar system.
Yeah, so 7 years of thinking about it and nothing happened.
Exactly.
There's a lot of that, because you got to like, for example, imagine if we had thrown caution to the wind when put $20 million of wind turbines up, and then the government comes and says, weather radar is not working because your wind turbines in the way. Can you move your wind turbines? Right? Which would have been a reasonable request because they need the weather radar to work, right? So you have to think of these things.
Yes.
You know, it's Danny asked the question about solar blowing away.
Yeah.
You got to think of that. You got to get it right, you know?
Yeah. And these are things that businesses obviously think about that consumers don't always appreciate. Johan makes the following observation. He says, people would appreciate CUC if they have lived in other islands in the Caribbean. CUC aren't perfect, but they are consistent and provide quality product that helps make Cayman a first world country with great infrastructure in a region deemed third world by the G20, etc. I've had the opportunity, Sacha, to tour your plant back in April. And I must say that I was blown away by what I saw in terms of the operations, the technology. You know, I don't even, it's so weird. What, sorry?
Just the sheer scale of it.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. It was so weird, but I hadn't really thought about, when you talk about, the CUC plant, I hadn't really thought about what the plant is, right? And you guys might not know this, but my brother-in-law, and he works in Jamaica, and he works at a concrete plant. So he's interested in plants, I guess, in general. So
they probably have their own power plant at that concrete plant as well.
Yeah. So when he came here, he was asking questions like, oh, well, how do you guys get your electricity and blah, blah, blah. And I said, oh, yeah, we got CUC, power plant, whatever. He's like, oh, can I see the power plant? I was like, okay.
I tell you what, we don't do a whole lot of tours these days because of all the safety regulations. So
yeah, but no, I mean, it was, folks, when I tell you the technology, the safety concerns, the, future proofing against another Cat 4 or 5 hurricane, what CUC has done to sort of offset some of those issues, elevation of their engines. I mean, when I walked into that main control room, I think that's what you call it, I don't know.
Yeah,
but we were just blown away by the monitoring and the controls that CU has. I mean, just the technology alone, I think that most people simply don't appreciate what it takes for us to be comfortable. And as much as we love the comfort that we have, right?
So yeah, the control system, my controls engineers will be upset at me for getting this wrong, but I'm going to just give this order of magnitude. It's monitoring in the order of 20 to 30,000 data points in real time across the island. And that doesn't even include the meters, which the control system doesn't have access to. This is just temperature sensors, voltage sensors. And so, yeah, the computing power to do that is quite tremendous, and it's a very it's a very significant investment.
Even with my limited knowledge, I was like, wow, this is really something to behold. Not So Hot has some questions about the fuel. So Not So Hot is saying that I wish that they would tell us how much they buy their gas per gallon for, because the rates per kilowatt is criminal, and they must be paying in EU currency. That's the only way I can see the rates being so high. And how hard is it to find fuel from another source? I know you've answered these questions.
Fantastic questions, to be honest, and I happily take them. Yeah, so we buy our fuel in bulk from the 2 local providers. We don't buy them on the same terms as what you would buy fuel at a gas station, and it's substantially lower cost than what you would see at the gas station, and that's because the gas stations have operating costs. They have to get deliveries by trucks. They have retailing costs. They got to put staff there. When we buy fuel at a few 100,000 gallons at a time. And it's just, all it is they push a button, they pump it through our pipeline, and it comes to us. So it's a far more efficient delivery mechanism than what you would do when you go and buy 5 gallons at a time from a retail pump. And actually very similar to the whole concept of utility scale versus distributed generation. It's just a matter of scale. So we get a lot of cost savings there. We also get a cost savings that the government has decided is beneficial to to energy customers that the fuel that CUC uses attracts a lower duty rate. And so those cost savings, I think it's about a 50 cent per gallon savings. Those cost savings are passed through. And you know, I know most customers don't see that the fuel charge has any cost savings because it is such a big charge, but there's been a lot that's been done to make that big charge less big. The question about looking at alternate sources. So if we were to consider alternate sources for, say, just the same diesel fuel, we have done that, and we analyze that option a lot. Part of the challenge with that is those alternate sources will need storage. So for those of you that have driven down Sparky Drive, you'll see that we have those tanks there, but that's not all the storage there is. If you drive down South Church Street and you look at Sol and Rubis, they have a lot of storage, and those tanks are not inexpensive, right? So to get a third provider to provide diesel, there's a lot of infrastructure that would be needed to provide it in the quantity that we use. What we are doing though, and actually actively doing just this week, is that starting the process to procure natural gas. Our engines can be converted to run on natural gas. And I was looking at the presentation that our partners are preparing in support of that. You know, the cost savings are in the order of about 50% of where we are today on the fuel. Of course, that's going to change depending on what the price of fuel is, but it's a significant savings. But the real benefit, at least in my view, is not only on the cost. The real benefit is it's about a 30% reduction in CO2, about a 70% reduction in NOx, and almost 100% reduction in particulate and SOx emissions. So that's, I mean, that's the primary driver, is the benefit to the environment of converted natural gas is oftentimes not seen as a good thing in continental situations because it does pollute. But that pollution compared to diesel is far better. And so we're pursuing that to get the cost savings and the environmental benefits for the customer. And you know, if and when solar comes and grows to where we hope it does, we would then only be supporting it with natural gas as opposed to supporting it with diesel fuel. And if we have to get rid of the natural gas because we've got enough solar in 10, 15 years from now, we can do that as well.
Yeah. So this follow-up question about whether or not you're obligated to buy from a particular company, you're saying that you purchase from the local providers.
Yeah, we purchase from both. We actually do competitive tenders with them every few years. Okay. And one of them will win a majority supply and the other one will win a minority supply. Or it is possible that we could be 100% with one, but that hasn't happened in the time that I've been with the company. There's always one of them that ends up winning the minority of the supply. And so they do have to compete with each other. But we also are monitoring sort of global prices, and we can, you know, control costs by looking at things like the diesel prices in the indexes in the US. And we use that as a pricing mechanism in our contracts.
Right. So, I mean, you're doing your part, trying to get the best value for money when it comes to the diesel that you're purchasing.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that it would be possible. Actually, I am sure that it would not be possible to get it here in the quantities that we need for less than the way we do it. Because each time we go through and do a procurement, we not only look at the local providers, we do look at third-party options. And invariably, we're always choosing the best choice that's available for Grand Cayman. It's still stupidly expensive, though.
Right.
And we got to get rid of it in the long run.
Yeah.
We got to get rid of it.
Go talk to OPEC. Not so hot. Convince them. So let's talk a little bit about, you know, people might be sitting here thinking, well, okay, maybe I do want to put a couple solar panels on my house. Is this open to anyone to be able to do that if they wish to do so?
Yeah. So right now there is no open program, but I suspect that will change in the next few weeks. We have put a proposal out to Offreg, and they're considering it now to reopen the core and DER programs. And we've also slightly modified rates, but not very different than what people are accustomed to. And we've also created a third program for people to choose from as a different way of getting credits for their solar system. And really just the idea is we're trying to, because some customers will say, well, core doesn't work for me because it has limits. DER doesn't work for me because I don't want to deal with demand rate charges, and there's a lot of uncertainty. So we're trying to create something in the middle so that there's just more options, so that everybody can get solar on the terms that they're happy with. And always trying to find a way of making sure that those terms that people can accept for solar aren't creating hardships for the customers that don't have solar. So I suspect that we'll hear something from Offreg on it fairly soon. And that's a 6 megawatt program. I believe a megawatt of it is being earmarked for government projects, which is great. And we're also doing our storage project, the energy storage project, which is going to help us accept a whole lot more solar onto the grid. We're doing studies now to analyze what that quantity is and what parameters we need to make sure are in place so that we don't sacrifice any reliability or create any costs. And we'll complete those studies before the battery project comes online, so that when the battery is online, we can move forward and really kind of just let solar go.
Very good. So not so hot. You're not paying not so close attention, because he did tell you already who the local sources are. But let's
I think Not So Hot's aware of where our local sources buy the fuel from.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, but your local sources, to be clear,
Sol and Rubis. Excuse me.
Two options.
But yes, there is no oil in the ground in Grand Cayman, so they are buying it from foreign sources. More often than not, it's from the Texas coast. Yeah.
All right. So Natasha says, in regard to wind energy, this is incredibly inaccurate. A windmill is a fixed disruption on the Doppler that can be accounted for. This is so misleading and wrong. It seems the problem is that there's a lot of people involved in these ideas who don't have the knowledge or expertise to advise accurately on them. So
Natasha is absolutely correct. She's absolutely correct. And in the initial phases, those sort of corrections were not available. And there's software solutions for it. Usually, from what I understand, and I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on it, I'm just regurgitating what's been told to me. So hopefully I don't offend Natasha's sensibilities with this comment, but a second Doppler weather radar could be placed in an alternate location, say somewhere in West Bay, for example, and you can then use software to superimpose the two images and recognize where the wind turbines are, and just delete that part of the superimposition to get an accurate picture. So absolutely, it is possible, and in fact, it is financially viable. I mean, the cost savings that would be brought about from wind power could probably buy 5 Doppler weather radars. So it's not a financial thing. It's just really getting those types of projects done first, and then we can deal with doing the wind power. The other issue with wind power is we can't hide it. So when it comes to, and when I say we can't hide it, these things are huge, right? If you think the 10-story building is a huge 10-story building, is about a third the height of a wind turbine. So imagine that, dozens of them. Where do we put it? Is that acceptable?
Because as most Caymanians, not in my backyard, right?
Well,
I want
the backyard, or I don't even want to see it from my backyard. But the reality is,
everybody's like, "Oh yeah, that sounds great. Cost savings sounds like a wonderful idea." And then when you go, "Oh yeah, we're going to be putting it right here in East End and Newlands," and no, now we can't do it.
Yeah. So. I mean, me personally, I've seen them, and I'm sure anybody who's traveled to places that have seen them, and I wouldn't say they're tremendously attractive, but they're not ugly, right? Yeah. They're industrial. Right. Yeah. But if you're looking for a natural view of trees and sea and maybe a house, that's not what you're going to get. right? So we have some questions to answer. There are, in Europe, they're putting thousands of these out in the sea. And I think once maybe floating wind turbines because of our depth of water, or I don't know, maybe we put them on 12-mile bank. I honestly don't know. We're gonna, I think some offshore wind, if it is financially viable to do so, may be an acceptable visual impact that we could see happen in the far future.
All right, Gary has some questions. He says, is there an education program by CUC or any other agency that will help regular users of the utility understand the benefits and sustainability of renewable energy? Well, that's why he's here, Gary. I love it.
No, it would be good. I think
you should have programs in school teaching kids too.
Yeah, and that's what we need. We need the general customer, the general population to understand these opportunities, the complexities with them, so that, because some of the decisions that have to be made are big, they're national level decisions, right? The whole, even on the solar side, to do solar, you got to develop a property to do that. I mean, yes, you can do rooftop, and there's a strong argument that's come out. Well, if we do rooftop, we don't have to use land. That's true, but the capability of the rooftop industry can only do about 20 to 25% of the energy requirements of the country. And that's just based on a number that was published by CREA, right? So that's not CUC's number, that's their number, right? So if you can only get to 25% of rooftop, where's the other 75% going to come from, right? So we have to come to grips on what is an acceptable place to put these things. And you're certainly not going to see any proposals from us that say, all right, well, we got to clear mangroves, because that's really going in the wrong direction, right? But we are going to have to develop land to do it, and we as a country are going to have to decide, is that acceptable? Right? Do we want renewable energy in the quantity that our national energy policy says, and what are we willing to accept to get that? And I don't think the answer is we don't have to give up a lot. Yes, we will have to develop some property. Hopefully we can find properties that have already been developed, but there's insufficient quarries, for example, which have been developed and abandoned to create enough space, right? And there's other areas that have been developed, but now that area is fantastic farmland. So it's we have some tough decisions to make.
All right, we have a caller. We've gone way into overtime, so we're going to start to wrap things up here. Good morning. Yeah, good morning, caller. That's okay. Question or comment?
Yeah, morning, Sunday. I was hearing about the 12-mile bank thing with
Don't hold on to that one. It was just
that was meant to be a joke.
There's a bit of a joke.
I know, but why not wave generators? Why not wave generators? I mean, I understand the solar is a future, yeah, but wave generators as in a reliable source of energy, that's 100% everyday thing. I mean, you cannot stop waves.
Maybe not this week. It's pretty calm out there today. But yes, wave generation does work. It does work. We have studied it. Sorry.
Yeah, caller.
Yeah.
Go ahead, caller.
I'm just saying that I think it would be a really good idea, because of the idea that the waves are ever flowing. And I mean, look at it. If you even store enough energy that you can just say shut down the plant for a day because it will be producing a lot of energy, isn't that a good option?
Yeah. So
with the budget of solar and everybody has to participate in it. Who can afford solar panels? I mean, a lot of people cannot afford solar panels.
Yeah, which is why we want to do it and put it on the grid so that people don't have to buy solar panels. They can get solar energy from the grid. But to get to your
the amount of land that you need to put the amount of land that you need to put these solar panels down to produce enough energy for this island, I mean, it's a big deal. It is a big deal, like you say, the plants and all animals that are using the habitat. in danger for them.
There's going to be no solution that doesn't have some sort of an impact on something.
Yeah.
So,
but the ocean is hard. I mean, I know they have ocean pollution and things like that. I mean, you have a big old garbage. I would call it a land mass in the middle of the ocean, like the size of Texas in the Pacific. If you don't have that here in the Caribbean, we don't have to worry about those type of things. The most we have to worry about is sargassum, seaweed.
Yeah, so the caller has a very, very good point. You know, and I think Sandra, you said it well, is also, you know, any of these options have negatives. Every single option has some negative. And the ocean one that he's referring to has negatives as well, but it doesn't have some of the negatives of other ones, right? So for example, it doesn't take a whole lot of land. But the challenge that ocean, the challenge that ocean wave energy has, and the reason why it's not very widely used throughout the world, it is used in certain places, particularly where there's very good wave action, is, and when we studied it, very technically viable. It could produce the energy and we could use it and so on. The issue is the cost per kilowatt hour of the energy from an ocean energy system is very high because the infrastructure is a high cost. So anything in the water costs more money because you have to design it for the harsh marine environment. So to put a machine there, yes, you can do it, and yes, it will work. Yeah. But the cost.
Yeah, but our island is well known for making more money than anyone else in the world.
Yeah.
So
but I can tell you, caller, your idea.
You're comparing to bigger countries than us.
Yeah, but sir, I can tell you, if I tell any of my customers that we're putting rates up, nobody says thank you. Right. So we have to be very, very careful about that.
Yep. All right, caller. Yeah, thank you very much.
Some really good points, and we are continuing to monitor that. And if there are advancements that bring it down into a cost-effective way, we'll be the first to recommend it.
All right. So Gary says he was expecting an actual program, not just an appearance on a show. Okay.
Thanks, Gary.
Natasha says she has a earlier comment on wind energy. I think we read it already, Natasha.
Yeah.
Unless I missed something else, but I think we got that one already. We read 2 of your comments. All right, folks. Listen, Sacha has been here for over an hour now. He was supposed to originally do 30 minutes. Went well over time. We appreciate you, Sacha, always being willing to come.
I appreciate the opportunity.
Program, answer people's questions, educate the public, answer the tough questions, the easy questions. You guys are here for it.
Yeah, no, thanks very much for the opportunity. There are no tough questions, right? Because there's just things that are not well understood, and sometimes they're not understood by us, right? And so the more we can talk about this, take input from the public, explain to the public some of the things that we're doing, why we're doing them, so that they can have an open understanding of their energy supply, the better. The more you know, the better. There's nothing that we have to hide. Like I said a dozen times, things are very expensive, and everything that we do every day is to try and reduce that. And I realize that's not happening fast enough, but it will happen.
Okay. Well, thank you very much again, Sacha. We appreciate having you here. Hopefully we can do the next segment, as we said, maybe a little FAQ with some accounts and opening accounts, changing accounts, all types of questions. So yeah, we appreciate it.
All right. Take care.